And let's come to the last talk of this session. That will be given by Florent de Dinechin from the University of Lyon. And it's a discussion about posits, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So please.
Thank you very much. I probably show with my hands. Yeah, so this joint work with Luc, who's here, Johan, who is another PhD student. Okay, yeah. And Jean-Michel, who is working in computer arithmetic in Lyon with us. So we all know this kind of good for the posits, and I'll try to sum up the reasons why posits work so well in, for example, neural network accelerations. Is that so you have near zero, near one, near the exponent zero, you have more accuracy in posits than in floats. And then you're summing many terms which are smaller, like the products of weights time inputs. And in float you do the same, but in posits you sacrifice accuracy for the lower terms. They have less bits in mantissa, but you don't care. Well, it's right to sacrifice this accuracy because it's not useful for the final result. So actually the trade-off is a good one here, because you have more bits where you need it, and you can say that floats compute in vain in this case. So that's the reason why you don't even need a quire. You have the quire, but you don't need a quire for posits to beat floats if you're in these kind of situations. So despite the title, there will be more good things about posits in this talk. So we come in peace, and we want to come back in one piece also. So, okay, now I have to motivate this work. And this is a much too heavy slide, so you just have to look at the red parts, which are the equations that you have to program in order to implement an elementary function. And I took the simplest function, which is the exponential. So to compute the exponential of a floating point number, so sorry, that's my floating point culture coming out. So my motivation is to try to do an exponential in posits, to program an exponential in posits, which is one of the next steps. Once you've done the BLAS, you want to do the elementary functions, the LIBM. And so eventually we want to get the exponential of x as 2 to the e times the exponential of y, so as 2 to the e times the mantissa. And the way we get there is we first compute this e there. So is that supposed to? Yeah. Yeah. So you first compute this integer here using some rounding. That's the rounding of x over log of 2. And it's an approximation because you have to do the rounding. I mean, it's an approximation because log of 2 is an infinite number, so you cannot catch it exactly. So then you do this subtraction, x minus, so x is your input, x minus the stuff you just computed times log of 2. And again, this is an infinitely accurate number, so you have to approximate this. And if you rewrite just this equation, then you exactly find that you're almost there. You almost have e to x, so you just take the exponential of this, and you get to this one. So you're almost there. So all that remains is to evaluate e to the y, but e to the y is not in a much smaller domain. So you can use a polynomial approximation or whatever technique you want to approximate e to the y, and then you'll get your mantissa. And all you have is then to do some bit shifting and tinkering to construct the scaling factor 2 to the e and multiply it by z, which is computed here, and you get the exponential. Okay, so in details, it's much more complicated, and I'll explain you why, but my main motivation is to try to do these kind of things. So a few observations first. The multiplication by 2 to the e was exact in floating points. It's always exact, except if you overflow, but in elementary functions, overflows are handled in separate paths, so we don't care too much. So this final multiplication will no longer be exact in posits. So that's annoying, but it's not going to kill anybody. We'll find a workaround. Then there's this very nice here subtraction, which is constructed to be a cancellation. If you look back here, I compute something, e times log 2 is by definition very close to x. So this is a constructed cancellation. And people well, if you're not used to the deep internal workings of floating point, you tend to see cancellation as evil. So is that evil? And my answer is no, it's a very good thing. Because a subtraction that cancels is always exact. And so it's bad only if you multiply the result by something, like in these polynomial solutions that we saw yesterday. But if you look at this example, so I subtract pi in decimal minus something which is close. So this subtraction doesn't involve in any warning because the terms were aligned, so there was no bit shifted out. And there's a general theorem that says that any cancellation that subtracts is exact. And so we can use that to implement all sorts of tricks to compute this part here that we need very accurately. So for me, cancellation is a good thing if I know how to use it. Okay, and that's the kind of thing I want to know if it works in POSIT as well. And the last thing which is important to understand why I'm doing all this is we need extended precision for a correctly rounded elementary function. So if we want rounding to the nearest even of e to the x, we will need to do intermediate computation in extended precision. The state of the art is to always do the computation in slightly extended precision, check if the result is accurate enough, and if it's not, which happens rarely, then we have to launch a much more accurate computation. So the first step, which we always do, is a few bits more than the target precision, your target POSIT. And then very rarely we'll do 3 times the target precision. So extended precision, oh, that's the quire. We can use the quire. We have this very large precision. And there's 2 answers to that. The first answer is that from a naive architect's point of view, the quire is much larger than the POSIT. So for 32-bit, I have an object that's 512 bits. So it can't be as cheap to compute there than compute on POSIT directly. So if I have a cheaper alternative, I'll be happy to use it. And technically, the cost in hardware is that you have to do a leading zero counting on this size to convert the quire to a POSIT. And you have to do a wide OR on this side. So the students computed this data. So since we need only limited precision, especially in the first step that we always implement when we evaluate an elementary function, is there something cheaper? So in this paper, I will not answer this question. We just checked what works and what doesn't work. So what tricks we can use and which tricks we cannot use. And we didn't do the quantitative assessment. Is it cheaper to do that than to go to go for the quire? Okay. So now I switch to the good part, the stuff that works well in POSIT. And it's all the tricks we had related to additions mostly work in POSIT. So the paper has a few boring theorems like this one, which is actually a conjecture because we only tested for low precision format using exhaustive enumeration, which is a very lazy kind of proof. So the rounding error that you do when you add 2 posits is itself a posit. So you're adding 2 posits, and sometimes you have a rounding error, but this rounding error, you can represent it as a posit. And why is this a good thing? It's because if you can represent it, you can compute it. So for example, we have this very stupid algorithm. I don't know, who has seen that already? John has, I'm sure, and yeah, a few people. So if A and B are reals, so I compute S, the sum of A and B, then I compute beta, which is S minus A, so that should be B, right? And then I compute T, which is B minus beta, which should be 0. So if you do it on the reals, this returns that T equals 0. And it happens that if you do it on floating points, on floating point numbers with a slightly different condition, or on posits, then you get in T the rounding error of the addition of A plus B. So this gives you, in only 3 operations, the rounding error, it gives you the exact operation. So you have lost, so it's written this way in the theorem. You compute S plus T And in SPC, you have all the information that you had in A plus B. So that's a way we can use, we can do cheap double precision this way. And that's exactly what we need for elementary functions. Another one, which is called Sterbant's lemma in floats. And that's exactly the lemma that technically says that if you have a cancellating subtraction, then it's exact. So, sorry, I didn't introduce this notation. It's just the posit subtraction is equal to the mathematical subtraction. And there's a condition, so the numbers must be close one to the other, and which is the way we okay. And again, the tricky computation of this, which we need, are based on this lemma. So technically, we use a sequence of 4 or 5 operations, I don't remember, with a special representation of log of 2 as two floats, and an exact multiplication because we have special representation of log of 2, and then the 2 successive subtractions that cancel but are exact, so we get a very accurate result in Y. Okay, so that was the good. Now, the first bad thing is, I already mentioned that the multiplications by power of 2 are not exact. And mostly all the equivalent tricks or exact operations or things that work well in floats don't work in posit if it's related to multiplication. And that's due to the tapered accuracy. All these tricks don't work in subnormals either, of course. So I'm consistent with the discourse, with what John tells you. So that's classified bad because, okay, I cannot just copy-paste my exponential code from float to posit, it won't work. But then it's a challenge, and we like challenges, so it's not that bad. I'm sure we can find workarounds for that. The second bad thing is that you have to be really aware of the scale of things. So if I take the same drawing as I had, so on the floating side, but now I'm summing something that ends up as a large value. Floats still compute in vain, the same way. But now posits compute even more in vain because all their accuracy is concentrated in a place that's irrelevant to the result. So in this case, posits will behave worse than floats. And of course, we saw that in one of the slides of the previous presentation. That you can. So in posits, you have to think about the scale. And that's annoying for some of the functions. We'll have this kind of problems will pop up. That's also annoying if you want to do a BLAS. There's a few properties of the BLAS related to the accuracy they have with condition numbers, etc., that have to be reassessed properly with posits. So the dependency of the quality of the result on the input is much stronger with posits than with floats. And it means that there's a lot of not these tricks that I've shown, but the kind of big theorems that people have built numerical analysis on have to be rebuilt. And again, it's a good challenge. I want to stress also here that even if the summation is performed in a quire, so I can summon the quire to compute this, but then I have to convert the quire result into the posit, and then at this final conversion, I will get a result which is less accurate than if I do a float plus quire. So I tend to believe, but again, this remains to be checked quantitatively, etc., that float plus quire, in terms of accuracy, will be more accurate than posit plus quire if we look at generic BLAS kind of things. Still, posit 16 are arguably better than float. So here I have only one posit 16 with ES equal 1, which is the one that is in the draft posit standard. It's better than float because it has wider range. It has this golden zone where it's more accurate than floats. And again, as soon as your result falls here, you're probably better computing in posit 16 than posit floats. And then outside of the golden zone, it has this subnormal-like behavior, but it's very close to to the floating point subnormal behavior. And so, yeah, it's the only part where your worse is these small triangles here and here, and you can argue that it's overall better. Now, if you look at posit 32, again, it's all a matter of presentation, but if you look just at this way of representing things, by the way, this is more or less the same graphs where John has a seesaw all over the place. It's just that I level the seesaw because I take the maximum error of one operation. But it's more or less the same graphs. So with the posit 32 with ES equal 2, which is the one that is in the standard, we still have this golden zone, and it's really huge. I don't want to hide the fact that you have 12 orders of magnitude. So that's a lot of space to live in. So in most of the case, if you rescale a bit to get there, sorry, you're more accurate with posit 32 than with floats. But then outside of the, I mean, if you don't like subnormals, then you have subnormal, you can call it tapered accuracy, but it's the same kind of subnormal behavior that we don't like with floats. So again, I'm being deliberately provocative here, because, yeah, why not? It's a matter of presentation, but and obviously then you have a smaller range for this standard format than for floats. And again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because for 32-bit precision, I mean 2 to the minus 120 is really should be enough for everybody. But I'll show you a few examples where it's not. And yes, the posits underflow before the floats go to subnormals. So, okay, another ugly, and that's because we see a lot in this conference. We see a lot of examples of code for which posits work better than floats. I think it's healthy to give just a few examples where posits behave worse, because just for fairness or whatever. And so this is an example. I just plot here some of the constants that physicists use. And it seems they really like to live outside of the golden zone. So the story, there's a very nice thing that's going to happen in 2 months. The international system of units is going to be defined completely out of numbers. So I think since Napoleon, it was defined out of bits of metal stored in Paris. And we got rid of the first bit of metals a few years ago when they decided that you could define the matter by the speed of light. So they defined the constant that is this number, this 9-digit number here. That's the speed of light. And if you have a good definition of the second, then the matter is defined by this constant, and not the other way around, you see? And so they finally managed to define all the other units using only numbers, and that makes it possible to reproduce measurements anywhere on Earth just out of physical laws. It's a very interesting read if you want to see that. So if you take all these constants which define the standard units, they all fall out of the golden zone. And for this reason, they are at various levels not accurate. So their number of bits is the 8 you have here. So for example, h has 0 correct bits. H is a Planck constant. And you see it's very far from the standard way if you try to represent in posits. So that was bad enough, but there's worse to come. And the worst is, I call that multiplicative cancellation because it's just as bad as cancellation, but with multiplication. And I'm not saying that it happens often. I'm not saying that I've been hit by this while working with posits, but I'm definitely assertive that people will get hit by that. So what is that? Is you multiply a very small number by a very large number, and here I taken the numbers far enough from 1 so that they are half precision of the maximum posit precision you get here. And in this case, the multiplication is exact, just like cancellating subtraction is exact. So you are actually cancelling exponents here. so you have this result, which is in the full precision range, but it's not more accurate than the inputs were. So it's only accurate to half of the bits, basically. And it's even worse than with the cancellation, because you don't see zeros here. You see noise that comes from the inputs. And in high energy physics, they use these two things, which you may have. I guess you've heard of the first one, so E equals mc squared. And here, m is the mass of one particle, so it's very, very small. C squared is the speed of light squared, so it's very, very large. And so this going, yeah, the multiplicative cancellation is not always exact. So if this one is a bit closer, then it's not even exact. So because then you don't have enough bits to represent the result exactly. Yeah, and E equals h now, nu it's the same. So h is the one which was very inaccurately represented, and nu is a frequency which can go to the terahertz range, so it's a very large frequency. And you actually use these equations when you collide particles and you want to know which particle goes out. You are able to measure the energy and come back to the mass or things like that. So that's actually used in post-processing in particle accelerators. Okay, now POSIT 64, as it is in the standard. Again, it has much smaller range than the floats. And again, I'm not saying it's bad. It's probably a good choice. The floats are probably overblown. No problem with that. But you shouldn't say that posits are always always have more range than floats, as you can see in the motivation of posits in many slides and papers. Because it's not always true. And it's not true for the standard for the two larger formats. And so the constants are still out of the golden zone. But to be fair, it's okay because they still have more than 10 decimal digits, even h. So POSIT 64 is good enough for high energy physics, I would say. Now we still have this tapered accuracy, which means that we have to rescale stuff. And again, physicists, they do rescaling. Like they express energies in electron volts, which is a kind of heavily scaled unit of energy compared to the joule. But the ratio between the electron volt and the joule is not a power of 2, so there's more errors involved, and I'm not sure that it's not falling on the other side of the golden zone. So I think we got rid of scaling when we moved to floating points, and having to get back to it, it's going to take a lot of convincing to the community to say, okay, now you have to think about your code again. And I'll express that positively in 1 minute. Okay, and then the gain is in this iceberg tip here. The posits are really better when we exploit this. And here we gain 2 decimal digits, and we already had too many. So I'm not really sure it's worth well, all the problems that will happen more or less silently with posits. So in the paper, we also suggest that we could have a transitory measure that allows people to play with posits without getting hit too hard. And basically to use POSIT 16 as a memory format and keep 20.32 units inside. So, and that's, I'm sure that's a good thing. It's not, FP32 is not a quire. It's less accurate than a quire, but it's already more accurate than the posits. Actually, the standard, the floating point standard doesn't explicitly tells you don't compute with float 16. It's not accurate enough. Just use it for storage. And people compute with it because people don't read the standards. But yeah. Okay. So if I try to summarize what I wanted to say, for very low precisions, I'm not sure the floats are the competition. Floats were never designed for that. So for me, the good competition on the very low range is not floats. It's the stuff that Jeff showed you this morning, logarithmic number systems. And even since if you're really on a small, like 4 bits kind of accuracy, you can use tabulation. And tabulation allows you to do completely wild number formats, like the UNUM 2 version, for example, or completely application-specific formats can be designed. Some processors include table lookup instructions, where you encode in the instruction the content of the table, and you can implement these kind of things very efficiently. For 16-bit, posits are better than floats, but you have to be clear if you use the quire or not, and you have to compare with floats that also use the quire. And that's actually the state of the art. The people designing floating point FP16 unit, floating point 16-bit units, actually converge to the fact that you can pack a full convolution in one instruction, and this full convolution uses an exact accumulator. So that's the way to organize a floating point unit. So that's work by Nicolas Bruni, published at Arwith last year. And then for 32 and 64 bits, I'm not sure you want to extrapolate from the smaller formats all the properties to the larger formats, because they have smaller range, they have this variable accuracy is bad, and the cost of the hardware quire is going to show. And we are currently trying to assess that quantitatively as accurately as possible. Now, the good part of the bad part is that we have a lot of challenges, and it gives us work as academics. So we need to rebuild our analysis. And I'm not saying I know how to do it, but I'm saying that if you want to have a BLAS that fits together the way the current BLAS works, so you can rely on a component to work in all situations, you have to attach more information to the accuracy of the component. And you cannot just take the BLAS and recompile it with POSIX. It won't work. POSIX force programmers to think about the scale of their numbers, and this may actually be a good thing. And there we are split between, I'm split between my wish to protect programmers against the fact that floats are not reals, and my wish to educate programmers that it's a fact that floats are not reals, or posits are not reals. So on this side, it's a good thing that the code won't work because you need to scale it, and people have to think about their code, and it will make the code better, even if then they run it on floats. So I wish more people would think about the scale of their floating point code in this part of my mind. Then on this side, posits are worse because they don't protect programmers from, well, you have to scale your code. Now we have to do the proof of these tricks that I showed you beyond exhaustive test. For this, we need the formal proof people. We need to have that in Coq, because otherwise I don't trust it. And it's very important to do that to get insight on what the reasons why things work this way, etc. And then the short-term work, where this property is important or not. And I think that's all. I can skip that. So we are trying to do the quantitative assessment of all this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can we see that last slide? Just before that. Back up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting slide. I wanted to see it.
Sorry. Yeah, so I need to write this function code to the end. We are in process of writing a complete hardware POSIT unit with the same effort I put in writing my floating point unit. So I'll trust the comparison when I've done it myself. And then this will allow the quantitative assessment. I can use a quire-based trick, or I can use a double POSIT kind of trick, on which one has the shortest latency, basically.
I know we want to get to lunch here. I just wanted to make one comment. We've set you up for the panel discussion, a debate between whether posits are really worth it, and Florent will be in that panel. I will be moderating it. I do want to say we welcome all of these criticisms, and we want to know as much as possible about what could go wrong. So you don't need to wave the white flag. I think you're among friends here, and we really appreciate the analysis and the thoughtfulness you put into this very much. I do have a way to fix the power of 2 multiplication that I don't think I'll take the time to explain right here, but it's actually quite easy.
Okay, more questions?
So I think, definitely the idea of, some operations, like the the cancellation, like the multiplicative cancellation and whatnot, at the risk to throw like another wrench and to this design space. Like you mentioned, I think the thing that's most interesting for me about posits is definitely as like a codec, as a like memory storage format, but something else because in order to perform like arithmetic on these types, like you need the sort of like maximum exponent size and the maximum sort of like fractional precision size. Something else to consider as well is that you could, for short runs of like calculations, you could actually, keep, the sort of like, full precision where the register which actually stores the type is, the full type needed. And, like certainly you can't keep everything in that sort of register, that size register. It won't, constantly pack back to like, say like a 32 or 64-bit, float, but, maybe something to consider, for computers which implement, this sort of thing, because, somewhere inside the hardware, like you need the, the flip-flops or whatever to store, the wider, all the maximum, fractional precision, the maximum exponent, precision, to perhaps, actually expose that. So it's like the normal floating point thing, except it's like, a 74-bit, floating point like register or something like that, and then you can, write it back at the risk of bringing back all the like 8087, like extended, precision floating point things. But
Compiler people will hate that.
yeah.
Because either you leave the decision to the compiler, and it means that compiler can completely break the accuracy of the code. They will try to improve it, but they can break it. Or you force that to the programmers, and then programmers won't like it. So it's a good remark, and even the choir.
Indeed, the choir is definitely like
choir
something like that.
I think is at the right spot. So it's a relatively simple object to understand. The standard currently explicitly forbids the compiler to summon the choir without authorization from the programmer, and that's the way it should be done. But it's already putting a bit of stress on the programmer, because it will have an overhead anyway, and so you'll have to manage a trade-off, and that's a good, interesting challenge.
Okay, more questions, or maybe we can delay that to the discussion in the afternoon. Probably everybody wants to go to lunch now. So let's thank the speaker.
Thank you very much.